couple of days. So welcome everyone to our short webinar on how to spot birds in Devon. My name is Kate Hind. I work for Devon County Council and I will be facilitating this webinar today. The webinar is part of 3 we're holding this week, and I'm sure some of you are booked on to the one tomorrow, which is spotting trees, and on Thursday, spotting wildflowers. We have created them to support the Active Devon and Devon Local Nature Partnership annual campaign, which is called Naturally Healthy May. The campaign is all about the power of nature and physical activity to improve our health and well-being. And May is a fantastic time to head outside and enjoy some fresh air and spring weather. Throughout May, we have supported a range of activities across the county. This includes free outdoor stargazing events, Tai Chi in lots of different parks, beach yoga, guided walks, guided cycles, and wildlife spotting events. To find out about the events, I will put a link in the chat to the Active Devon Activity Finder, so you can have a look. There are also lots of opportunities and activities you can do without joining an event. On the Devon Local Nature Partnership website, we have lots of useful links and resources, which I will also put in the chat. So this webinar is about 20 minutes long, with time for questions at the end. If you do have any questions for Mike, if you can put them in the chat and we'll go through them at the end. We have removed all the scientific jargon from our webinars because we really want to help you spot what is around you. I find right now seeing things emerge over spring and being able to notice what they are, firstly, it does make my walks a lot slower, but it also enriches my walk, and I love sharing with people what I see. There's a whole community of people across the country who enjoy this, all at different levels, and at the end of this, we'll share with you some more resources to signpost you. Lastly, a bit of housekeeping. So as I said, we're recording this webinar and it will be going on the Devon County Council YouTube page in the next few days. If for any reason you drop off the webinar and you want to get back, please just click on the original link we sent you. As I said, any questions, can you please put them in the chat? And please, can you keep your mic muted throughout Mike's presentation? So now I'll hand you over to Mike, who is a Devon County Council ecologist and the Devon Local Nature Partnership coordinator. Mike isn't just knowledgeable about birds, but also plants. And he is the first person to teach me the difference between a swallow and a swift, so the perfect person to run this session.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming along today. I will try and get my slides to move. There we go. Yeah, so thanks for coming along. Just to say, I mean, it's just a beginner's light touch overview of some of the some bird groups that you can find in Devon or anywhere really in Britain, just for beginners to start to get their eye in. So it's not going to be technical. So if you're expecting a technical presentation, this isn't the one for you. We're just going to have a light touch look at some of the bird groups that you might come across when you're out and about this spring and summer. So yeah, a bit about me and birds. I was saying to Kate, it's actually the first dedicated bird webinar that I've done, but I've been into birds for a long time. I sort of started when I was about 8 or 9, got obsessively interested in watching birds in my nan and granddad's garden. And from there, crisscrossed the country, looking for waders and all sorts of other things. So they've always been quite exciting for me. And then from that, I started to get into plants and particularly orchids as well. But it's always birds that have interested me, and I've got lots of birder friends, and they're just exciting, aren't they? There's lots of different songs that we can see out there. So we'll start simple. So we'll start with the garden. So you start looking out in your garden, and what do you see? You see lots of these little groups of birds. They're tits, and I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with the tits. They're a group of birds which they're quite generalists. They eat insects and seeds, but they hop around in the treetops. They can be down low. They make the most of lots of different opportunities, and quite a few of them nest in nest boxes as well. So people tend to be quite familiar with them. But sometimes they can be a bit tricky to tell apart. You know, telling apart your blue tit from your great tit or your coal tit can all be a bit confusing. They're a similar size. They've got similar calls, and they do kind of look quite similar as well. So let's start with the most common one that I think most of you will be familiar with. So we've got the blue tit. It's one of our most common garden birds. It's the only tit that's got blue on it. Quite familiar little bird and very active at this time of year, eating caterpillars. Most famous because they, during the 70s, I think the 70s, 60s, maybe it was a little earlier than that, but in the 20th century, they quite quickly learnt how to tap into the tops of milk bottles that were left on doorsteps by the milkmen. And obviously, in the decline of milk bottles being put out, you don't see this behaviour anymore. So they're quite inquisitive little birds, and they can work out how to make the most of different opportunities. You'll often see them on the bird feeders out and about. So they're as I say, quite a common bird. Bottom left there, that's a young bird. So they're slightly different, a bit more sort of yellowy green all over. They don't have that blue immediately. That's something that develops as they become an adult. You'll see lots of little young blue tits later on in July, where they're nesting at the moment, but they'll be on eggs now, and then they'll hatch, and then you'll see lots of these little baby blue tits around. I think they have quite a high mortality rate, so you'll see lots of them, but it's not actually that many that make it through to adulthood. So that's the blue tit. Now, a little bit smaller than the closely related great tit. As you can see, bottom right there, a little bit bigger, and as a result, a bit more dominant. So they'll be dominant over blue tits at the feeders, and we'll chase them away sometimes. So what's very distinct about the great tit, of course, you've got this big white face patch. Some of our other tits have got that. So you're looking for the combination of the white face patch, but also the bright yellow underneath. And what the photo on the left really shows you quite nicely is the difference between the male and the female. So the male on the left has got a big black, thick black stripe down the middle, whereas the female has a much thinner, smaller one. So you can actually tell the difference between the two, whereas with the blue tit, I don't think it's quite as easy. So look out for the great tit. At this time of year, or maybe it's just past the time, they have the males, well, they start in February actually, this very high-pitched call. It's just a do-do-do-do-do-do call constantly. That's a great tit, so they start marking out their territories with that call, so listen out for that. Now, one that kind of, I think, does sometimes confuse people, looks similar to a great tit because it's got the white face patch and the black head, but it's much, 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 much smaller. And of course, it doesn't have the yellow, so it doesn't have the yellow underneath or the black stripe down the middle. This is the coal tit, tiny little bird, the smallest out of the four that we'll be looking at today. Tends to be quite associated with pine trees, conifer trees, but you'll get them in the garden as well. Distinctive also because they've got this greyish back, and then they've got a white, you can just see it in the right hand photo, they've got this white stripe along the back of the head, a bit like a little badger. That's quite distinctive. Grey all over, little white patches on the wings as well. So quite a nice little bird, slightly less common in the garden, but you do see them around. So if you see a great tit and coal tit side by side, you'll see there is a massive size difference, and they're quite different in terms of colour as well. Now the last of the tits, this is one that Kate has yet to see, which is such a shame because it's probably one of the best, if not the best of the tits. But confusingly, it isn't actually a tit. So it's called the long-tailed tit for obvious reasons, but it isn't part of the tit family. It's actually part of a different group called the babbler family. So they're quite distinctive in appearance, hard to confuse, got this lovely long tail, lovely pinkish colour to them as well. Fantastic colour, quite unusual in birds in Britain to have that pink coloration. And they're distinctive because you often hear them before you see them. So they have this very distinctive call, which you can just look up on YouTube, you're able to hear it. I'm not going to do an impression. My great impression wasn't very good, so I won't do it. But they hang out in groups, family groups all the time. So they tend to move through an area foraging together as a family group, always in groups. You can see bottom left there, they have quite a lot of chicks as well. So this is a group of chicks all lining up, ready to be fed. What's also really nice is they create quite an impressive nest. You can see there in the middle, the little great tit mother or father just poking her head out there. It's almost like a complete cocoon with a small hole in the top made of lichens. So they create this lovely, comfortable little nest, which sometimes you'll find in winter hedges and trees when they become a bit more visible. So look out for the great tit, lovely bird. Right, so let's move on quickly to our next group of birds. So slightly more tricky, so getting a bit more tricky here. So these are the swift swallows and martins. Now they're starting to return. Sand martins, house martins, and swallows are back in the country. Swifts are, it's a little bit early for swifts. They're not quite back yet, but although they're slightly different families, so the swift is slightly different family to the swifts and the house and the martins. They're all insectivorous. They all feed on the wing, and they're all migratory. So they all winter in Africa. down to Africa for the winter, and then come back to breed. As I say, the swift is a little bit later. So let's go through some of the details and sort of pick out some of the differences. One will start with the swift. So the swift is, as we could see in the last slide there, is the largest. So I've tried to do these to scale. The swift is by far the largest out of the four, okay? So it's got these really long scythe-like wings, almost like a boomerang. And the reason for that is that they are highly evolved for spending enormous amounts of time on the wing. In fact, they spend 10 months of the year on the wing without landing. That's 10 months of constant flying, which means that they sleep on the wing, they mate on the wing, they feed on the wing, everything. So they're flying around for 10 months of the year, just getting on with life. Quite impressive birds. And I think what's quite distinctive, so what tells them apart is not just the size and the shape, but they're also this dark sort of sooty brown colour all over. So they haven't got any white on them apart from just under the chin. But I mean, when they're high in the sky, this is what they look like on the left, just sort of dark all over, and they hang out in these groups, and that's usually how you'll see them. They're mostly over urban areas, over towns and cities, and they nest in little crevices in the tops of buildings. They've got tiny little feet, so they can only cling onto almost vertical surfaces. So you won't see their nests stuck to the sides of buildings. They're sort of in the crevices under the eaves of buildings. And on a warm summer's evening, you often hear groups of them flying around really fast, screaming, doing this screaming call, sort of chasing each other around. Lovely bird. But they won't be back until probably May, so not quite, a little bit early for them, so look out for them. So next one you'll probably be a lot more familiar with is the swallow. Beautiful birds. So actually, when you get to see them nice and close up sitting like this, you'll see they've actually got this dark red around the bill, lovely shiny navy blue color on the back and on top of the head as well. What's distinctive about these is that the males, I think maybe the females as well, they have these big long tail streamers. So at the sides of the tail, see the bottom left there, they've got these long filamentous feathers kind of coming out the back. So that's quite distinctive. And you can see actually top left where they're all lined up there, you can see those long tail streamers really clearly. So unlike the swift, you'll see swallows perched out in the open on wires, on posts, and they'll sit there and sometimes they'll sing. So it's got this really distinctive bubbling song. But these guys, unlike the swift tends to fly quite high up. Swallows will fly really low, sometimes just above the grass in open sort of tall grass meadows, catching insects on the wing. They can fly quite slow, they can fly quite fast, really distinctive. And then obviously they've got this lovely white underneath as well. It can be like the bird on the right there, a little bit more sort of buffy coloured. Their actual proper name is the barn swallow. They traditionally nest in barns. They form this lovely little mud cup nest, and you can see there in the middle at the bottom, where they raise their chicks there. Unfortunately, declined quite a lot. The swallow really struggling. They are coming back into the country now, but I haven't seen any yet myself, but maybe you have. So keep an eye out for the swallow. Next is house martin. Okay, so house martin also forms a sort of little mud cup nest. You can see there bottom left, there's a load of house martins collecting mud to make their nest. Now, the distinctive thing about house martins is that if you look top left there, unlike the swallow, they've got white on the top, just between the wings and the tail, they've got what's called a white rump. The rump area is white. So that's distinctive amongst all of the swallows, swifts and martins in this group, is that they have that white rump. So if you see that, you've got a house martin on your hands. And you get them in good light. They've got this lovely navy colour, quite similar to the swallow, but obviously when they're flying quite high, you don't tend to see them. So another bird that's sort of struggling, it's declined quite a bit, but they still do nest on buildings. You can get these nice little ready-made cups and stick them on the building to try and attract them. And actually my grandparents used to get them on their house, but they don't anymore. So that was my first introduction to them, where they used to nest. So look out for them. And then the final one is sand martin. So sand martin is the smallest. And it's also interesting, it's the first to come back. So these guys will start to come back in March. Why, I don't know, but they come back into the country very early. They are very associated with water, and the reason for that is that, as you can see top left, they nest in holes in sandy, muddy banks. So they need quite a specific habitat. But yeah, the way you tell these guys apart, a little bit smaller, very brown all over. You don't often see them perched. When they do, you can see that they've got this nice little brown band across just below their chin, across their chest. And you can see it when they're flying, but you need to be quite close to actually see that. But that's the distinctive feature. unlike the house martin, they don't have that white patch on the rump on the top. So they're just sort of brown all across the back, white underneath with a little brown stripe just across the chest there. So if you go to some of the larger lakes and bigger reserves, big wetland reserves, you'll often see this species in quite good numbers there. So keep an eye out for sand martins. Again, I haven't seen any yet, but they should be. If you live anywhere near Exeter, if you go out to Exminster Marshes, you can see these flying around at the moment, because they come straight back in over the channel and then immediately start feeding. And sometimes you can get up to 100, 200 birds swirling around, feeding over the waters. Lovely sight to see. And actually, I saw a lot of them in Spain last month. Lots of them there coming back from Africa. Okay, so let's get into our final group. Oh, sorry, before I move on, this is a really good resource. So if you pop onto Devon Wildlife, if you go up onto the Wildlife Trust website and have a look at swift swallows and martins, everything I've just said there is covered. So obviously there's quite a lot of detail there. If you go on that website, it will give you all the information you need, and probably a few other bits of details that I've missed off as well to help you in IDing and separating those species. Right, so let's move on to our final group. Now, I guess for some people, we might recoil in horror at the thought that we're going to talk about gulls. A lot of people don't like them very much, and rightly so. I've had a pork bat snatched out of my hand that I spent half an hour queuing to get, and it cost me about £7.50 in Lyme Regis. It felt like someone had punched me in the shoulder, and I turned around and a herring gull had hit me in the shoulder and knocked it out of my hand. So understandably, they love them or hate them, they're impressive birds and quite intelligent as well. But it's not just the herring gull. We've obviously got a few other species of gull around which can look quite similar. And I thought it'd be worth just having a look at some of those gulls and separating them. And I think, you can often see these gulls quite close up. You don't necessarily need binoculars, and it's often based on colour and size. So yeah, as I say, herring gull, very familiar with this, the chip snatcher, an impressive bird actually, but lots of people don't particularly like them. What you need to bear in mind with the herring gull separating from the other gulls is they have this very pale grey back on the wings, but they've got pink legs. So they've always got pink legs. That's a really important feature. Now, gulls change their plumage from summer to winter. So on the left here, we've got a lovely herring gull in full summer breeding plumage. But on the top right, that's what they look like in winter. So they become a little bit more drab. They tend to they develop a mottling around their neck. And that's kind of sort of as they change through the months. So yeah, I think we'll all be familiar with the herring gull. Although they appear to be very common, they're actually on the RSPB red list, which means they've had a significant decline in the last few years. And that's partly to do with the reduction in fish numbers out to sea and the reduction in bycatch being thrown out to sea as well. So they've actually declined quite a lot, but they have moved more inland than they used to be. They used to be a lot more out to sea. They've come more inland, but they have become rarer, which is interesting. Okay, so then we've also got the lesser blackback gull, very similar in appearance, similar size as well. You can see there bottom right, quite a similar size to the herring gull there at the front and the lesser blackback gull just behind there in the bottom right hand photo. But as you can see, a little bit different in that the wings are a much darker grey, sort of slaty grey colour. So that's the first feature. The second one is that the legs are a different colour. So the legs are yellow. So you've got dark slaty grey back, yellow legs, you've got a lesser blackback if it's about the same size as a herring gull. So these are, they're found in lots of different environments. You can find them at the coast. You can find them actually, I usually see them a lot more inland in sort of urban areas. So where I'm from in Wolverhampton, I often see lesser blackback gulls soaring around above the city centre more so than herring gulls, which are a bit more coastal. So they've had a bit of a decline as well, the lesser blackback gull, but they're still, and they're often found in lower numbers as well. So you'll often see the odd one or two sort of around the place, and they do hang out together, herring gulls and lesser blackback gulls, you'll see them together. So one to look out for. And then we've got the big brute. So this is the greater blackback gull. It's the largest gull in the world. So we're very honoured to have the largest gull in the world in the British Isles. they are absolutely massive. They're so big, in fact, that they can hunt quite big prey. Now, obviously, if you're squeamish, I'm sorry to put this photo in, but they do hunt rabbits as well. So out on some of the, so on Lundy, for example, out on some of the islands in Scotland, and particularly on Skomer Island, if anyone's been there in Pembrokeshire, you'll see the mangled bodies. It's absolutely horrible. The mangled bodies of rabbits, of a bird called Manx shearwater, which is this quite rare bird that breeds in burrows. They're a seabird. They're a lot smaller, and greater black-backed gulls will rip them out of their burrows and eat them. And they'll also swallow puffin chicks whole. So they're quite brutal birds, really quite big, very powerful. You can see how powerful it is by the size of that beak, really big, sort of big beak for chopping up meat and flesh. So quite an impressive thing. As you can see, bottom right there, you can just have to see how much bigger it is than the herring gull. So this is two birds in winter. The herring gull it's a big bird in itself, but you can just see how much smaller it is compared to the giant greater black-backed gull. So really big. They're probably the I couldn't say rarest. They're not particularly rare, but they're only ever in 1s and 2s, never more than that, and always at the coast. You never see them inland, always at the coast, sort of scouting around looking for carrion. In fact, I saw one down near Brighton the other day feeding on a dogfish, and it chased off all the other gulls. So they're quite dominant as well. Really impressive thing. Now, one that I'm sure everyone is much more familiar with is the black-headed gull. And as I was just saying to Kate before the webinar started, the black-headed gull is an incorrect name. It should really be called the chocolate-headed gull, because it isn't black at all, is it? It's chocolate. So they only get their chocolate head in the summer. So right now, they sort of start to get their chocolate head in, their dark head in about March. So they're in full breeding mode at the moment. So they nest out on freshwater marshes, places like that. So they've moved away from the coast. So you won't see so many of these at the coast right now. They'll be out nesting at the moment and raising chicks. They've distinctively as well got this very thin red beak and the red legs. But then in the winter, so most of the time they're in their winter, what they call the winter plumage. So top right there, that's what they look like in winter. They just have this little black mark behind the eye, but otherwise a white head. Important to bear in mind, and of course these are a lot smaller, as I should say, these are a lot smaller than the other three gulls we've just looked at, much smaller, about half the size of a herring gull. But what is distinctive about them comparing to the next gull I'll speak about is that you can see that on the top right hand photo there, the tips of the wings are black. Okay, so they're otherwise quite grey and white, and they've got these blackish tips to the wings. Bottom right there is a juvenile, so you can see they've got a bit more brown on them, but otherwise a very similar shape. They've yet to get that dark reddy colour in the legs and the beak, so it's a bit more of a sort of washed out orangey kind of colour, but you'll see lots of those around as well. But we won't get into juvenile gulls because that's a whole other world. So that's the black-headed, or as I prefer to call, chocolate-headed gull, very common around our coasts. Now, one that's very, very similar, but is a little bit more rare, but gradually increasing in number, is the Mediterranean gull. So they do breed in Britain in small numbers, and I think they do breed in Devon in small numbers as well. But these actually do have a black head, so maybe this should be called the black-headed gull. A little bit bigger than the black-headed gull, but as I said, it's important to bear in mind that with the black-headed gull, they've got those black tips to the wings. Mediterranean gull, they've got they're completely white at the back end, if you like. The back end, the tail, the wings, completely pure white. So that's the first indication you've got a Mediterranean gull. The head is completely black. Again, they've got the red legs and the red beak, but the beak is a little bit bigger and thicker. So the bottom right-hand photo shows you you've got a black-headed gull in the foreground, Mediterranean gull behind, and you can sort of see the tonal difference between the heads, can't you? You've got that chocolate colour, that dark colour, but also you've got that black tips to the wings of the black-headed gull, completely whitish at the end of the Mediterranean gull. So these guys are increasing in number and are gradually becoming more common over time. Probably just one of the many species that we're starting to see moving into Britain as the climate warms, along with lots of different species of herons, things like glossy ibis, all these other things. So it's kind of, we're expecting to see more of these guys as time goes on. So do keep an eye out for them. You're more likely to see them in winter. So that top right photo is what they look like in winter. So they're similar to the black-headed gull, they lose their dark head, and then they sort of have a bit of a blackish markings just behind the eye. So you're looking for that white. The ID focuses on the back end there, those white tail and wing feathers at the end. So that's it for me. Kept it quite short. So what I would say though is, if you are interested in getting out there and having a look at looking at birds, this is a great time of year. Birds are very active. They're calling, they're setting up territories, nesting and breeding in full summer plumage, looking great. But I can highly recommend these 3 books. These are really good. So the middle one is what would be known as the Bird Bible, really, in Europe. It's got everything you need to know about birding in Europe, or as a guidebook for the whole of Europe. But if you want something that's a little bit more specific to Britain with a few more photographs, then Britain's Birds by the Princeton Press is also a fantastic guide as well. But also the RSPB one as well. So I could highly recommend all of these. And in fact, I know Simon Harrop, who's the publisher who's the author of Britain's Birds, and he's really good. He's done some really good orchid books as well. So definitely pick those up and take them out with you. And if you want some ideas of places to go, then have a look at definitely join Devon Birds for a start. They manage a few reserves, but they can also give you some really good ideas of places to go around Devon. And they also run a bird blog, which is updates on sightings of rare birds, which you can look up online. So that's a really useful resource. Of course, the RSPB are quite active in Devon as well. So as I've mentioned, Exminster Marshes, but they've got various other reserves around Devon as well, which you can go and visit. And of course, Devon Wildlife Trust have got lots and lots of different reserves, which are just as good for birds as well. So definitely go on those websites and have a look around. So I hope you enjoyed that. It was only very light touch, I know, but if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to take them. And yep, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. That was really brilliant, and it's kind of made me want to get back outside and get my, I don't have binoculars, I have a monocular, but it'd be really good to get out. And thank you everyone else for joining today. We would love to hear what you go and see, so please do send us a message. You can do that via Facebook or any photos you have. We do have in May a photography competition, all to do with getting out and outside. So if you are interested, I will put the information in the chat. So I've just put in the chat the link to all of the events that are running in May, and I'll do the same now for the competition. Anyone can take part in the photography competition. It's more about your photos and the experiences you're having. It's not for professional photographers. So please do have a look at that as well. So before we end, let's just have a quick look and see if there's any questions. So the first one I've got here are there any groups for beginners in North Devon, Barnstable area? So I know, Mike, there's quite a big Devon Birds contingency in North Devon that are linked to an organisation called Coastwise. So Coastwise do intertidal, they do lots of groups going out onto the intertidal looking at crabs and doing surveys, but a lot of them are birders as well. So I can put the link for that in the chat. Do you have any others in North Devon, Mike?
Yeah, I haven't spent much time in North Devon, so I'm not sure, but it might also be worth contacting the North Devon Biosphere. They might have some ideas, but no, you've spent a lot more time there in the UK than I, so you'll know better than me, I'm afraid.
There you go. I've just put the link to Coastwise, so if you contact them, most of them are also members of their local bird group there. Let's have a look. Do swifts drink on the wing or come down to the rivers? That's a question from Roma.
So all of the swift, swallows, martins, they do an amazing thing where they skim across the water. You may have seen this before. There's some great photos online of them doing this. So they'll come down really low when the water's quite flat and calm on a lake. They just skim, so they drop their beak into the water and still flying, just sort of drink off the surface. Quite impressive. So that's what they'll do. But they also get quite a lot of their moisture and the water that they need from the insects that they eat. Of course, they're full of moisture, their insides. So they don't need to drink a huge amount, but when they do, yeah, they just sort of skim across the surface on the wing. Quite impressive sight to see.
And then the last question I have, unless there's any more that you can put in the chat, is can we access this video at a later date? So the plan after this is I'm going to take the recording put all the correct captions on to make sure people can view it. And then it will be going on the Devon County Council YouTube page. And we will email everybody who signed up today with that link. It might take me a few days because I've got to do the tree one tomorrow and the flower one on Thursday, but hopefully it should be pretty swift, and then you can access this. And then after today, after seeing Mike in action, I'm hoping I'll be able to persuade him to do some more in the winter as well, as we start to get our estuary birds coming back in November and December as well. But yes, Mike, everybody's put lots of lovely comments in the chat saying thank you very much.
Thanks.
So unless there's any other questions, I'm going to end the recording, and hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow for our tree session. There you go.